Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Now I just wanted to do a little video trying to explain how to use a BFS reel. It can be a little bit of a minefield. When you first start using a BFS reel, it can be quite confusing. It can be a bit of a steep learning curve. Just wanted to share a few ways that I've managed to sort of negate a lot of those problems. Now what I want to do is just go through what the bits of the reel are, what they do, and how to set it up properly to avoid getting catastrophic backlashes and bird's nests and all that kind of thing, and basically ruining the first few sessions that you go out with the reel until you start getting used to it. So that is your BFS reel. You've got your drag, which controls how tight the line is or how loose it is. You've got your spool tension, which I like to set. That's a little bit too much play for me there, because it's moving side to side. Now if I tighten that up a little touch, I just want the tiniest little bit of side to side. Not much. There you go, until it's barely moving at all. That's perfect. And then, on top of that, just tighten that drag up just a little touch. There we go. So that's your spool tension. Then these are your brakes. So on this reel it goes from 0 all the way up to 20. You might have a 1 to 6, you might have 1 to 10, you know, whatever it is. I'd set them relatively high to start with. So your spool tension, barely any side to side play. On the drop, this is a very light low, and I am using quite thick fluoro because I've just picked this up from another session. So that's barely falling. It is a very light lower. If it was a heavier lower, it would fall quicker. Now, if I cast that, that's pulling right over to the left-hand side. Because it is such a light low, it's pulling right over to the left. Now, if that was a heavier low, that may well have been perfect on that brake setting. But with it being lighter, I need to back that down just a little touch. I'll try and cast a little bit further out to the middle, just to try and give you an idea of where it's going. Now that's okay, and that would be very safe to use. I'm not actually trying to catch fish, but if I do catch one, that would be great. Yeah, that would be very safe to use, but your distance will be reduced. Now I'm going to back the brakes down maybe another 2 and just see if I still don't backlash there. So I'm on 8 at the moment. I'm going to back it down to 6, and I might have to cast a little bit smoother. That's still pulling to the left hand side a little touch, or at least it is when I cast over that way. The wind's blowing in from left to right, so we can't really see, if I'm casting straight out, how far it is pulling to the left, because the wind's kind of blowing it back. So I'll try and cast into the wind. Yeah, still pulling to the left just a little touch, so I may well need to back that brake down just a little touch again. This is if you're a right-handed caster, so if you're casting the rod with your right hand and the low is pulling to the left, as long as you've got your release point right, if it's still pulling to the left, then your brakes might be a little bit too high. So it might be worth backing it down a little touch and going from there. So I'll back that down another 1, only the 1 now, because we're starting to get to the point where that could be perfect. So I've just got to 5. This low probably weighs about 2 grams total. So 5 for this low is very safe, and I'm still getting good distance and I'm able to control it. So that for me is perfect. So another way that you can do it, not a way that I'd prefer, to be honest with you, is tighten up your spool tension until the low barely drops. So that's quite tight there. Now for a lot of people that'd still be too fast. And then they tell you to just back your spool tension off until the low just drops down like that, very slowly. Might be a bit too quick, what they'd say. That's a little too tight, because that's not moving. There we go, just barely moving. Now that for me, very consistent, but I'd prefer to have the sort of micro adjustment of the brakes, and I prefer to use the brakes for what they're there for. I'm not saying it's wrong to do it the way that I've just shown you, but I don't feel that you get the maximum out of your reel if you're doing it that way. I just don't. I feel that if you set your spool tension to barely any side-to-side play and then use your brakes then to control the spool rather than using the spool tension knob to control the spool, I believe that you're going to get better results, and I believe that you're going to get better distance on your cast. Now, I'll show you a couple of little bits to do with the cast as well. A couple of little things that I found quite helpful and quite useful when I first started using bait casters, because to start with I was trying to cast it like a spinning reel. Now this is not a spinning reel, it is a bait casting reel, and it's a finesse bait casting reel. So when you're using a spinning reel, typically you're letting the lure out, what, probably 3 foot, 3.5 foot, and you're trying to swing it back and let the weight of the lure do the work, kind of thing. You're not loading the rod up quite as much as what I do with a bait finesse setup. Now what I've found to be a little bit more effective is if you shorten the length between your rod tip and your lure, like what I have done there, and just try and feel, wave it back in two and just try and feel the weight of the lure all the way through. And what I mean by the weight of the lure, you're trying to feel that flex of the rod constantly. If you feel that it's like janky and you're losing the weight of the lure like that and all that kind of thing, just try and get it so it's smooth, back in two. Now when you've got that, what you can then do is try and employ it into a cast. So what I'm going to do is just a side arm cast, because that's 90% of my fishing. Probably do about 10% backhand when I can't get a right hand side arm off. So about a few inches, 3 inches, 4 inches of line, thereabouts, and just try and feel the weight of the lure and use the bend of the rod to flick the lure out. So essentially what you want to try and do is use the flex of the rod to try and flick that lure out. Like an elastic band, you stretch the elastic band out and that fires itself. What we're trying to do is use the rod as kind of an elastic band, like a catapult, to try and flick the lure out. There we go, like that. Now that works a hell of a lot better, and it's a hell of a lot more consistent when you've got a short amount of line from your rod tip to the lure, a few inches, 3-4 inches, thereabouts. If you were doing an overhead cast, you'd have to let a little bit more line out. You'd probably have a couple of foot thereabouts. But just for your sidearm cast, a little bit of line like that, and just feel the weight of the lure all the way through. You don't want to lose contact with that lure at all. You want to make sure that you feel that lure. You want to feel the weight of it all the way through. Now if you lose contact with it, what that will feel like is you'll feel the lure, then you'll lose the weight of the lure, then you'll feel it again, then you'll lose the weight. And if you do that kind of thing, either your cast isn't very smooth, or you just haven't got used to the flex of the rod, because all rods will flex different. This is quite a moderate flex rod, so it will flex a little bit more, even with these lightweights, as you can probably see there. Some rods won't flex quite as much, and they'll have a slightly different timing on when they spring back and when to let go and all that kind of thing, but you need to find the timing for your rod. And it might take a little bit of time, but you will find it. You will find it eventually. Now with an overhead cast, just reel this one in. I'll do a quick demonstration of an overhead cast. And so you won't be able to see this because I'm behind the camera, but what I do personally is I'd just I'd up the brakes just a little touch. So I was on 4, or was I on 5? So I was on 5, I'd up it to about 8, thereabouts. Just up the brakes because it is a bit more of a vigorous cast. I'd let a little bit more line out, so probably about 2 foot, 2.5 foot, and then back. And you still want to try and feel the weight of that lure all the way through. It's very, very, very important that you feel the weight of the lure. Because as soon as you lose the weight of that lure, that's when you start getting problems. You start getting backlashes, you start getting issues. You really, really don't want to lose contact with it at all. Reel this one back in. I've just seen a few bubbles coming up from what I assume are going to be bream that are grubbing about on the bottom. So yeah, as I say, that is pretty much thereabouts what I would do to set a bait caster up. Set your spool tension, barely any play from side to side, just a tiny little bit. Make sure you drag. You can pull a little bit of line out, but it's not pulling it out straight away, and it's not too tight that you're not going to be able to get any line out when a fish grabs the lure. What else was there? Brakes. Start high and back it down. If your lure's going to the left, back your brakes down just a little touch. I mean, we are still thumbing the spool, so that's a bit of a learning curve in of itself of where to let go, and you know how much you need to thumb the spool and all that kind of thing. So thumbing the spool, what I tend to do is, you've got that little bit of line in between your lure and your rod tip. I usually let go around about here, so the front of my body is here. I usually let go around about, I'd say, what, 90 degrees, maybe a little bit less than that. So 45, 90, I'd say between 45 and 90 is where I let go of the lure, and then flick it through. Now what we want to be doing with thumbing the spool, sorry, is you want to stop that lure, or you want to be thumbing it down when the lure's dropping, and as soon as it touches the water, you want to be on that spool. So you're letting go between 90 and 45 degrees if you're doing like a side arm cast, and you're thumbing the spool down. When it starts slowing down before it touches the water, a little bit of thumbing. Thumb all the way through if you wanted to, but if you've got your brake set a little higher, which you probably will do when you're very first starting to use a bait caster or use a BFS reel, you can start thumbing it when the lure's falling, and then when the lure hits the water, you want your thumb on that spool. If you don't have your thumb on the spool, when your lure's hitting the water, you will get an overrun, you'll get a backlash, which isn't good. And the first time trying to pick one of those things out is an absolute nightmare, and it almost makes you quit BFS fishing, I'll guarantee you. But if you stick with it, it's 100% worth sticking with. Now I think that just about wraps it up. It's only a quick video just to give a couple of little pointers, just a couple of little things that I've learned along the way. A couple of little things that might make it a little tiny bit easier for people that are first starting getting into BFS fishing, because as I said, it can be quite a steep learning curve. It can be very, very difficult to learn, especially if you've no one around you that does this style of fishing. If everyone else is using spinning reels and you're wanting to get into BFS fishing, it can be difficult. You know, there's so much conflicting information, and I'm not saying take mine as gospel. I'm not saying that I'm fantastic and that I know exactly how to use everything with a bait caster and I'm the best caster and all that kind of thing. Far from it. But it's just a couple of little pointers that have really helped me sort of become a little bit more consistent with using bait casting reels. So really, I've only been using them for about 2 years. And I know 2 years sounds like a lot, but when you're an old man like me, it's not that much time really. But yeah, during that time, I have had some catastrophic backlashes, but 9 times out of 10, it's catching weed and or catching little bits and bobs on the back cast. It's not usually, that's talking about weed, look at that, beautiful. It's not usually backlashes when I'm casting. It's usually when I catch on to something on a back cast, I've not really paid much attention to what my surroundings are. So yeah, that was just a basic run through of your reel functions, what they do, how to set it up, a couple of little casting tips. I just hope it helps someone. I mean, if it saves one headache, you probably will still have headaches with using a bait casting reel or a BFS reel, but if it saves one headache, then it's a little bit less pain for someone. It's a little bit less than I went through. So with all that being said, I'll leave you to it. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, leave us a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.